And good afternoon, Steve Schmidt with the warning, joined as always on this Monday at noon by Ryan Lizza at Telos. And we are here today after a monumental July 4th weekend in the United States. There's a lot going on. We'll wait for the crowd to build. Let me just get right into it, though. I thought, Ryan, that one of the most shocking, unremarkable, yet remarkable utterances ever is on the 249th anniversary of the country. The President of the United States goes out and he pronounces his hatred, for the Democratic Party, and I suspect for 77 million Americans who voted against them.
Yeah, it was the core Trump tenet in that he's not president for everyone in this country. He's only president for people who support him. It's one of the most shocking breaks with almost every president in history. Even if they had to fake it, they paid homage to the fact that the office of the presidency is the only office that represents every American, right? Unlike your House representative or your senator, and you do everything you can, even if you disagree with half the country on a number of issues, to at least pretend that you represent everyone. And a core tenet of his time on the national stage has been to just throw that out the window and have absolutely no compunction about only representing people that support him. And there's not a single Republican who will consistently call this out and talk about how absolutely batshit crazy and dangerous it is. So anyway, how was your 4th of July weekend besides that, Steve?
It was good. It was good.
While we wait for some people to come on here.
It was good. I watched the Yankees get swept in Toronto
Yeah.
by the Blue Jays. I was at 3 of those 4 games. Those were all great baseball games, and pretty amazing to watch Aaron Judge up close. The catcher of the Blue Jays is about 5'6" tall, and Aaron Judge is 6'7" tall. So it's an amazing thing to see these two professional athletes standing next to one another. Just extraordinary.
We both grew up in the tri-state area, the real tri-state area. I know there are other parts of the country that have tri-state areas, but the real tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. You grew up in New Jersey. I grew up on Long Island. Who did you root for as a kid?
I was a Yankee fan. I was a Yankee fan.
You were?
And those were great. And those were great Yankee teams.
But why were you a Yankees fan? You're just a few years older than me. You weren't a Mets fan in the 80s?
No.
Wow. You missed out on some of the great decades.
I was in the 70s. I distinctly remember that summer, right? It was the summer of Sam, right? There's a great ESPN series about this called The Bronx is Burning. These were the Billy Martin-led Yankee teams: Reggie Jackson, Thurman Munson, Ron Guidry, Goose Gossage, Chris Chambliss, Greg Nettles and Bucky Dent. I distinctly remember the Bucky Dent home run over the Green Monster in the division tie-breaking game. So I grew up, I was a Yankee fan, and then I was raised as a Jet fan. Most Yankee fans and Giant fans go together, and a Met and a Jet fan is the combo there. But I was a split between those two. And of course, right, like any kid, I was raised into this by tradition. So, my dad made me a Yankee fan. He also cursed me as a Jet fan. But I've gotten back into baseball in this year and last year after a long
hiatus. Maybe I should try that. I could still
very relaxing in the evening.
Yeah, maybe I should try that. I could still tell you the whole starting lineup of the '86 Mets. but I can't tell you, past 1990, I can't tell you much baseball trivia. I was a Mets, Giants, Knicks, Islanders fan. Those were our core teams. Obviously, the Islanders, yeah, that was the strive for five era when they won multiple Stanley Cups in a row. And then, yeah, I missed the Yankees era that you're talking about. I was still too young. And then once the Mets got good in the '80s, that was kind of my team. Went to every home World Series game, Steve, in '86 against the Red Sox. The famous Bill Buckner miss. Saw that. And that was just an incredible year. And and anyone in the comments who went to any of those games, or the incredible playoff series against the Astros, the National League playoffs were amazing as well. But my knowledge of baseball just declines after the '80s because I got out of it. Maybe I should get back into it. I don't know, especially now that they've. What do you think of the new rules that are speeding things up? You pro or con?
Bro,
Yeah,
bro.
is that one of the reasons you're back into it?
Yeah, I mean, you can go to a game and not be there for 5 hours, right? You can go to a
Yeah.
3 o'clock game and be home by 6:30. And if you live close to the ballpark. Well, anyway, before we get into the politics discussion, I would say there's two great baseball documentaries I'll recommend to everybody. You can find them out there on Apple TV or Netflix. First one is by Yogi Berra's daughter, excuse me, granddaughter. It's a documentary about Yogi Berra. It's incredible. If you
Gotta see
watch the
that.
Yogi Berra documentary, you really appreciate what a winner Yogi Berra is. And there is a story about Yogi Berra in there about, I don't know what you would call it, about good luck, right? It's an astonishing that this guy was, he's Yogi Berra. And the story, just, you have to watch the documentary to see his story. But Yogi Berra was a D-Day veteran. And when Jackie Robinson first came up to the plate against Yogi Berra stood up, took his mask off, shook his hand, and said, "Welcome to the major leagues."
Hmm.
Yogi Berra was a great American. And the other documentary is about Nolan Ryan, which is a great documentary also. And those are two great baseball documentaries you can everybody who's watching, you can go, you'll enjoy both of them, including when Nolan Ryan was 46 years old and he beat the shit out of the young player who charged the mound after Nolan Ryan, who hit him. Nolan Ryan put him in a headlock, and he was 46. And that fight in the documentary is narrated by George W. Bush. So it's an incredible
Wow.
narration of the fight of Nolan Ryan at age 46 on the mound. But
Well, I'm I'm glad to see. I hate to be a jerk, but I'm glad to see that George W. Bush could leave the ranch or his Florida home to engage with what's going on in the world for something, even if it's only Yogi Berra, rather than the decline of our democracy. Um, what is your favorite Yogi Berra saying, Steve?
ain't
You
over
have one?
till it's over.
That's a good serious. I have two. And I always say them to my kids. This is like, dad humor 101. The first is, when Yogi Berra was asked how many slices of pizza he wanted, how many slices he wanted his pizza cut into, he said, of course, eight, four or eight. He said, "Oh, four. I don't think I could eat eight." Um, and then my second favorite one, which I use all the time, is, you know, there's a very popular place, and um, uh, Yogi Berra said, uh, that friends wanted to go, goes, "Oh, well, nobody goes there anymore. It's too crowded." I hope I got that one right. Anyway, love Yogi Berra. Love those expressions. Let's talk about some. Oh, last thing on this, while the crowd continues to build here. Watched two great documentaries over the weekend. I spent so much of the weekend promoting and pushing out and trying to get as many eyeballs on Judge Michael Ludig's piece that he wrote for TELUS News. I was so proud to publish that, Steve, and so appreciative of you to have the two of us on and talk about it last week. And I just wanted to promote the hell out of it. And I think we did a good job of that. A lot of people read it. If you haven't, please check it out at my site, telos.news, telos.news. And and reading it a few times, Judge Ludig was in Monticello with Ken Burns, celebrating a uh, sneak preview of Ken Burns's forthcoming documentary about the Revolutionary War. And Ludigan was telling me about how amazing the preview that he saw was, and it just sort of took me down some Ken Burns Revolutionary War era documentaries, and I watched two. I watched Ben Franklin, which is more recent, and then from the late '90s, Thomas Jefferson. And of the two, I have to say that the Ben Franklin one I enjoyed a little bit more, just because Ben Franklin's a such a great character. Have you seen either of those? They're absolutely
Uh,
fantastic.
uh,
If people
yeah.
are still in the July 4th mood, check them out tonight. The fascinating thing about the Thomas Jefferson one, Steve, as of the late '90s, the idea that Jefferson fathered Sally Hemings's children was still completely controversial, not settled. And if you watch his documentary, I think it was 1997, it's most of the historians in that documentary are saying that the weight of the evidence is against him being the father. um, I think we know now from the DNA testing that uh, uh, what the history's judgment has shifted on that. It's much more conventional wisdom that he he did father those children. But that was it's interesting to see how even within 25, 30 years things have changed. But anyway, I recommend both of those. All right, let's get to it. What's on your mind?
Well, what I would say is that more than anything else, that the coverage is picking up around something that was not really discussed at, I think, full volume over the course of the Big Beautiful Bill debate, which is the uh, expenditures of money for the American secret police, the ICE force, where all in this is funded to the tune of $125 billion dollars, with $45 billion dollars in construction for concentration camps. That's exactly what they are, meets the textbook clinical definition of what a concentration camp is. The fetishization of cruelty, the sale of these alligator Alcatraz shirts. It's all immoral. Donald Trump has already started talking about ownership responsibility, as in that these migrants will be leased or loosed out of the detention facility to some corporate interest to harvest crops in an economic relationship between a corporate interest and the state using a form of slave labor. And it is immoral, it is illegal, it is reprehensible, and you just see it all coming 1,000 miles away. So I know, because I was involved in my career, in my consulting days. I was the lead strategist for the San Francisco 49ers as they moved out of San Francisco to Santa Clara, and they constructed the new stadium there. It's a beautiful stadium. And that stadium, NFL stadium, Super Bowl stadium, came in at about $1 billion. You go into the premier public forums in the country, the state of the art, mind blowing, the Southern California football stadium, the SoFi Stadium, the Las Vegas Stadium where the Raiders play. Those stadiums were $2 billion stadiums. And we have a $45 billion concentration camp budget. I mean, surely with 1,000 people on here, we've had a couple that have seen something in the SoFi Stadium in Southern California. When you walk into the place, truly, It is an astonishing, beautiful architectural marvel for the ages. And you say, well, what does that cost? You can build that for 2 billion. $45 billion in camps across the country. And what do we know about those camps, right? What do we know, right? If we have an open sewage pipe spilling sewage into the ocean, what do we know about what that sewage is going to do to the water quality, right? It's the same thing. So we know that the masked agent leads to an abuse, that this is about the weaponization of fear, that what goes on in these detention facilities, how can anything that has an American flag flying over it ever detain any human being in a condition where they have to drink water from a toilet bowl? And so we have to understand that when evil manifests itself, what happens when the mob comes to Tulsa to Black Wall Street in 1921? What triggers that hate and that violence that creates a pogrom against Black people that is the equivalent of the Kristallnacht, right? What happens, right? That triggers the cruelty, that triggers the abuse, that triggers a mean lie, right? There's going to be a moment where there are terrible degradations going on, where there is rape occurring, where there is abuse occurring, and there will be some young federal contractor, worker, whatever, who will witness it. And will they have the courage to stop it? And history teaches us no, they won't. They will get in line, they will walk away, and we will look away. And we cannot look away in this moment from what is happening, what is being done in our name, and all of it is wrapped in this revelation by Trump, his announcement of his hatred of the American people, the president of the United States saying, I hate them, right? 100 million people in the country. And so what we see this weekend is the fulfillment of an era where the vote had become a weapon to be used, not to pick what you believe is the better side of an argument in a country that we share together, where dissent is important, where different viewpoints are fundamental. It became a weapon to punish the people you disagree with. And this is the awful manifestation of what Newt Gingrich started so long ago, that the taking of the health benefits, of the food benefits, the joy and the spreading and the suffering of the pain, the politicization of the cruelty. It's the textbook definition of fascism, is what we're watching, witnessing play out. And it must be opposed. It has not been effectively opposed. And the American people now are on a countdown in 2026, in 2028, to make it stop. And what Democrats are going to have to do one by one is ask for power to make it stop. And in order to get the power to make it stop, those Democrats are going to have to make some commitments to the American people about doing some things differently from what they have done.
Well, well said. I want to talk a little bit about this allocation in this bill, because as you pointed out, it didn't receive as much coverage as it should have. A lot of people were talking about, and there's a lot in the bill that's awful and is going to hurt people. The upward distribution of wealth from the poor to the rich because of the upper income tax cuts, kicking people off of Medicaid. But this is what Trump cared about. This is what Stephen Miller cared about. And J.D. Vance, if you believe him, this is what he said the bill was really about. This was the final push to get everyone in line. They pointed to this expansion of ICE and expansion of immigration enforcement as the reason to support the bill, even if you didn't like other things in it. It was sort of the reddest of red meat to MAGA. There's more money in this bill for immigration enforcement than what the FBI gets, than what
Then for the Marine Corps,
the Marine Corps, the Bureau of Prisons. That's how much this expansion is through 2029. And I want to read something by a professor who I've read and admired over the years, and I think is a very level-headed analyst of what's going on, and always has been very empirical. And her name is Theda Skocpol at Harvard. Some viewers may be familiar with her. She wrote this last week. It's a little long, but I think it's really, really worth listening to her. And she teaches a class at Harvard with Dan Ziblatt, who is the co-author of with Steve Levitsky of How Democracies Die. And here's what she said. Last spring, when Dan Ziblatt and I taught a course on democratic backsliding, our study of the Hungarian and German cases in the 1920s and 30s left me slightly reassured about the United States today. All right. So this is her saying things won't be as bad as those two cases. And why did she think this? She thought it because Hungary is highly centralized, and in Germany, the most important state transformation happened just before Hitler was appointed chancellor, when the previous government nationalized the Prussian police and bureaucracy. In other words, these were big centralized states where a person at the top could seize the reins of power through centralized armed forces. She was optimistic to a certain extent about the United States because we didn't have that. She continues, not long after unexpectedly, Hitler could easily turn the centralized agencies into the Gestapo Corps. I thought last year that the United States of America was somewhat protected against any similar coercive authoritarian takeover by its federal structure, given state and local government rights to control most U.S. police powers. In fact, she presented this argument in a prestigious lecture at the American Political Science Association last fall. She goes on, but now I see that the Miller-Trump ethno-authoritarians have figured out a devilishly clever workaround. Immigration is an area where a U.S. president can exercise virtually unchecked legal coercive power, especially if backed by a Supreme Court majority and corrupted Department of Justice. And I'll just pause to note that the Supreme Court of the United States had a case in front of it where Donald Trump's executive order overthrew birthright citizenship, which is guaranteed in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court was absolutely silent on that matter, and instead dealt with the secondary matter of national injunctions. So she's right about the court backing him. And a corrupted Department of Justice. Now, Congress has given ICE unprecedented resources. Okay, so we now have the Department of Justice completely politicized and corrupted, a Supreme Court backing Trump's every move, and now Congress spending billions and billions of dollars on ICE. Unprecedented resources. Okay, much of the windfall to it will be used for graft with private contractor that Trump patronizes, but lots of it to hire street agents willing to mask themselves and do whatever they are told against residents and fellow American citizens. The Miller Trumpites are not interested only in rounding up undocumented immigrants. They will step up using ICE and DOJ enforcements used to harass Democrats, citizens, critics, and subvert future elections if they can. This is the key story unfolding right now. Governors and civic groups and media outlets need to get clear on this imminent threat and work together across the board to reveal and push back against the emerging ICE police state. This is a scholar of democracy, of what happens when they backslide. This is someone who has studied very, very carefully the cases of Hungary and Germany in the 1920s and 30s and was reassured by the system we have in the United States, our federal system, that we, to a certain extent, were protected. She's looking at the bill that just passed and saying, oops, I was wrong. There's a loophole. They're spending 40, they're spending $150 billion on ICE we've already seen in the opening months of the Trump administration. He wants to personally control. This is a 5 alarm fire, Steve. And the coverage of this, you're seeing obscure professors on blogs. That's where you're finding this stuff. You're not finding it in the front page of the newspapers. You're not finding it even on MSN and on MSNBC.
No. Um, there are very few anybody's talking about this, and one person who understands it is AOC. And what she said that makes me appreciate that she gets it is the way that she expressed it, which is with absolute and total wonderment about the scale and the size, and basically saying, um, I don't think people get it. I don't think people imagine. Can you hear me, Ryan? Okay.
I can hear you just fine.
Um and so when we think about this,
I
to
do see,
me,
Steve, just so you know, I do see in the comments that a lot of people are saying there are audio problems. Can anyone in
none.
the comments, anyone in the comments okay with the audio? Yeah, everyone's saying no audio, guys. Our audio is fine, Steve. Let me see what's going on here. I'm just going to turn my computer on for a sec here. Yeah. Other people can hear, Steve, so let's just keep going.
All right, hang on one second here. I'm gonna
Yeah,
feel like
it's
you know,
mixed.
MacGyver. Hang on one second.
Yeah, it's mixed. Half people are saying that it's fine. The other half is saying they
Could
can't
be.
hear.
Uh-oh. Am I back?
You're back. You're fine with me. Half the people seem to be saying no audio,
Okay.
and the other half seem to be saying it's okay. So
Okay.
we're just going to have to keep going, and hopefully, when we post this, the audio will be there. So if the live stream is messed up for you, you can watch it this afternoon when we post it. Okay. Other people are saying good now. Let's start. All right, we're back, Steve. We're good. Go ahead. You're talking
Okay.
about AOC and how she
Um
gets it.
and so this, as terrible as this legislation is, and ultimately what it's going to do, it's going to crash the economy. It's going to superheat the economy, to encourage all manner of speculation. You look at all of the economic indicators of everything that is happening, um, terrible consequences. But the election ground that we're going to fight over is the fundamental transformation that this bill will bring to the country. And I mean this. If you want to look at transformative pieces of legislation since the end of the Second World War, you have Medicare and Medicaid, you have the GI Bill, you have the Interstate Highway Act, you have the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Act, and now you have this. And this is going to fundamentally change the complexion of the country in terms of just the feeling of freedom. Masked agents will be everywhere. This is a budget that would make ICE one of the largest and best armed militaries in the world. And what we're about to see is an evil vision, and the American people didn't vote for it. I don't think they'll stand for it. but they're about to witness it at a level that is going to be difficult for a lot of people to imagine.
I think that last point is really important for people who are watching this and saying, what hope is there? The point about the polls, Steve, and I would encourage people to look carefully at the polling numbers. It's not popular, believe it or not, and thank God, to snatch people off to have masked agents snatching people off the streets without due process and sending them to foreign countries that they're not familiar with, sending them in to be tortured at gulags. It's not popular. When people learn those facts, it's as you would expect. People are horrified. Um, but we're in a situation here where in the first few months of the Trump administration, they have tested a series of things, and they now have legislation to supercharge it. They have tested what the reaction is when they send agents and pull people out of Home Depots and 7-Elevens. They have tested what happens when they federalize the National Guard and send them into the streets. They have tested what happens. What do the courts say? What does Congress say when they send the Marine Corps to LA to quell alleged riots? They have tested what happens when Trump casually says that the democratically elected candidate in a Democratic primary in New York City should be thrown out of the country. They've tested when a Republican congressman says that candidate should be denaturalized. And I don't know if you really want to get worked up and scared, look at some of the laws around the authority that the president has to denaturalize a naturalized citizen. President has enormous powers that are on the books from our immigration laws. It's not as cut and dry as you would think. If he wants to denaturalize someone, there is actually a process for that. So put all that together, all the things that they've been testing to see what the courts do, to see what other Republicans do, to see what Democratic governors do, and now request $150 billion to supercharge all of this, to pave the way for uh, getting the Stephen Miller demanded 3,000 arrests a day, to pave the way for being allowed, now that the Supreme Court has endorsed it, to send people to third party countries that they have never, ever lived in, to test the reaction when they talk about denaturalizing duly elected officials. Um, this is not happening behind closed doors. This isn't secret. It is 100% out in the open. And where he's about to have almost all of the tools he needs to go forward with this Stephen Miller plan. The law enforcement tools, the pat on the back from the Supreme Court, the total silence from Republican elected officials who are now complicit in all of this because they all voted for this package.
100%. And so, as this plays out, the American people will have to turn to the Democratic Party in 26, right, candidate by candidate, district by district, to say we have to put a check on this.
And they're in a
And
tough
those
place,
Democrats,
Democrats, Steve. They're in a tough place. I want you to talk about whether you think they're ready for this.
well, what do you mean by that? The leaders or the
The
individual
leaders,
candidates? Is
well,
is
yeah.
is
Tell us a little bit
Abigail
about that.
Spanberger ready? I think Abigail Spanberger's ready. I think Mikey Sherrill is ready, right, to take command in New Jersey, right? Chuck Schumer's got to go. And I want to say this, right, with the British could not fight the Nazis with Neville Chamberlain at the head of the government. The Democratic Party cannot effectively fight MAGA with Chuck Schumer as their Senate leader. And so what happened was in March, there was a battle, and then there was a very fast surrender. And that was the moment when the government needed to be shut down to save it. At a moment when Trump was much weaker. And that's when Chuck Schumer goes out and he says, we're winning, we're winning, we're winning. Right. But those girls killed on that riverbank without a warning, National Weather Service, unstaffed. If you jump off the building that's 20 stories high, you're going to die. Consequence follows action. And so indiscriminately, the functions of the federal government that matter, that save lives, weather service, decimated, 100 people dead, no warning. Vaccines, you have the first cases of lethal measles in 30 years in Texas, right? You know, killed by politics. On issue after issue after issue, including the decimation to FEMA that will be felt when a terrible hurricane season lands on us, and that's coming. The decimation of the FAA, and when a commercial airliner crashes, there's consequences to all of this. And so, with 49.5% of the vote, Donald Trump enunciated that he had received the greatest mandate in American history, though it was a lie, while claiming that he had won an election that he lost, while saying the insurrection he incited was a peaceful protest. And with each step of the way, each egregious, audacious lie, he built power, he built strength. And so we have arrived at a place where he has broken ABC News. He has broken CBS News. He's broken much of the corporate media. Billionaire class has capitulated. This idea that you see advanced by professors out there that businesses and CEOs are some sort of moral force in the society, and that it's important for companies to take a stand all in line. The American people will have to decide now, because their society has been reordered by MAGA, and said that to be great again, you have to hate each other. And waiting in the country for a voice to rise up and to talk about the fact that we're one people and we share an American identity, and that's steeped in meaning and values and ideas that have been passed down through us by imperfect people, from imperfect people, and that freedom is a very rare thing. And that all of us are each other's keepers. And in a free society, the American identity should bind us to having an understanding that if mass people can snatch anybody off the street anywhere in this country, no one is safe anywhere. That's a fundamental lesson of history. And so it's been long predicted, if fascism came to America, it'd be wrapped in the flag and carrying the cross. And I want to say something with regard to the professor, because I think her analysis, as you read it and she stated it, and it may be broader, but at first blush, she misunderstands Germany as a society in the 1920s and in the 1930s. Germany was a fragile, nascent republic, and the military was really a root branch of the German aristocracy, and it was opposed to Hitler.
Hmm.
What happened in Germany was an evisceration of the middle, and there was a choice. There was a far left communist choice, and there was a far right Nazi Hitler choice. And so Hitler goes and he gives this speech in Dusseldorf in 1932 to the industrialists. And the industrialists don't like Hitler very much. But basically, the pitch Hitler makes in the speech is, hey, you got nothing to worry about from me. You're going to do great with me. The people you got to worry about are the communists. And those communists are going to kill all of you, kill all of us. And you see a function of this. I got a call from a billionaire telling me, "Oh, please, we got it. Will you work for Eric Adams? Will you talk to Eric Adams?" Right, because of the anti-Semitic socialist. And I laughed. The fear of the left in America is enough to create the conditions to elect a fascist regime. And we've seen that play out. There is no possibility of there ever being a left autocracy in the United States. It's outside the boundaries and possibilities of the national character. And that is what we share in common with Germany. If the choice is made, right? If the gun is held to your head, right? MAGA or the Democratic Socialists, what Trump understands is he never loses that fight. Ever. Not in
We
this
saw it.
country,
We saw it last year. Kamala Harris was, this
right?
moderate, the second in command of a moderate, mostly moderate administration, was defined as an absolute radical lunatic. You're absolutely right.
And
And every
and
Democratic race always comes down to that, right?
and
Every Democratic
so
candidate that's run, that is any national Democrat that has to run against that caricature. It's not the same for Republicans.
and Democrats have had an allergy to wave the flag, and you have to wave the flag. You have to say I'm an American. My identity is American. I'm an American patriot. I'm not a hyphenated American. I'm an American. And as an American, I object to this. And so half of all Americans, I say this all the time, have ever lived or alive right now. In the America we were born into, the 50-star American flag, right? The 50-star flag is the only American flag by star count where we have lived under the law in an equal society, where all are held equal from a civil rights and voting rights perspective, right? And that flag did not exist before 1959. And when it came into existence, America was still an apartheid society. And so we are, and many historians look at the story of America, right? The civil rights movement really being the birth of the Third Republic, Reconstruction being the birth of the Second Republic, and the birth of the Third Republic, the 50-star Republic, is new. And we're seeing a tremendous backlash and regression to a unimpeded advancement of civil rights, sexual rights, gay rights, all across the board over many, many decades. You see a revanchist, reactionary, angry, malice agenda of people filled with grievance who have met their demagogue, made him their God, and declared him the law. And so the majority does not support this. And yet, it is also the case that the majority does not support the Democratic leaders, doesn't support Chuck Schumer, right? So the issue isn't about, can we get Chuck Schumer back into the majority leader seat? It's, can we get a check on Donald Trump? And that's the only question that anybody needs to talk about, right? And ultimately, it's become very, very popular to call for the defunding of this out of control federal police agency.
Well, it's not probably not lost on you, and it's not lost on me, Steve. The irony that defund ICE, which was one of perhaps the most damaging political movements to Democrats when it was popularized by some online activists a few years ago, is now going to be is going to have to be part of what Democrats talk about. And defund ICE was the shorthand for Democrats not getting it when it comes to immigration. And now the immigration regime has gone so far to the right, is so extreme that the Democrats need to figure out how to talk about this in a way that doesn't push people into the arms of right wingers who believe that the public will support the most extreme uh, regime of immigration enforcement. And that's not going to be easy for Democrats just to have to stand up and say, you know what? ICE should be defunded. They're masked. They're lawless. They need to be reined in. They need to stop dragging people off the streets and sending them to foreign countries. And I know a lot of Democrats who the strategist class hasn't figured this out yet, Steve. And there's still a lot of Democrats that don't want to talk about immigration. And Trump he's making it as difficult or more difficult than ever on this issue.
Well, the problem with the Democratic Party in Washington and with this consultant class is a lack of conviction and an inability to assert convictions. And so a secret police force larger than the budget of all but a few of the world's most potent militaries is un-American, unacceptable, and it can't stand. And I don't give a fuck what the poll says. Right?
And I should
There
make a
has to
correction.
be
Wait, one correction. It was defund the police, abolish ICE. Just to
right.
get my slogans right. It was abolish ICE. Sorry. Go ahead.
And so it's fundamentally absolutely abhorrent in a free society. And what we have to start talking about is civil disobedience. And we have to remind ourselves of our Henry David Thoreau. Um, Civil disobedience against outrages are proper and are the right thing to do, are the moral thing to do. And so everything that's happening, Donald Trump will say is the law. Kristi Noem will say is the law. Every abuse will be called the law. Every dissenter will be called a criminal. Every time that there is a truth exposed about what is happening and there's a protest about it, there will be an assertion made by this Trump regime that the law is being broken. It's important to remember that everything the Nazis did was legal under German law. They were assiduous about it.
100%.
And so all the threats, all the enunciations of law and order and what in fact they are is utterly lawless. And all of this must be documented. All of this will be held to account. And let me just say that under international law, under international treaty that the United States is signatories to, there are human rights violations and crimes being committed. And though the American government is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, all it takes is the next Democratic president to sign an executive order saying that we recognize the jurisdiction, and Marco Rubio and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan and Stephen Miller and all of them can be in handcuffs over in The Hague. And I don't say that lightly, but I mean this with dead seriousness. There's lawlessness, there's evil. They're not going to have the last word on it. We will fight back about it. I'm gonna start. I just want to share one thing, and I don't. We're not
Yeah,
ready
go
to
go
announce
ahead.
this, but since we're on the subject, is I have stood up with Bishop Barber and a group of other citizens, an organization called the Save America Movement, and it has begun to operate, begun to advertise. And it will take a lot of actions over the next months. And in the totality of it, in the end, what we hope to do is to build a followership and an organization of millions, sustained by hundreds of thousands of donors, that exists in all 50 states, that is able to register millions of voters. And so when you look ahead at the election and we start to operate, what are some of the things we're going to do? So what one of the things we're going to do is that in the neighborhoods where ICE is most active in Los Angeles in the weeks ahead, we will be deploying assets. And what you'll see in essence are green Sprinter vans that will have the wrap around them, the green wrap, the Statue of Liberty, and they'll be Liberty vans. And they will be in those communities, and they will be staffed with a chaplain, with a lawyer, and with a film crew, and they will have the ability to shoot ICE live, and to put it immediately onto Substack, but to film constantly and to spread around the country the images of what's happening, and to also begin the type of trainings that build a disciplined opposition, that are able to confront this the proper way, with discipline, with approach. And so we will film it, we will document it, and we will make connection, and we will begin to lay out a template of how to document these crimes, and to make certain in the communities that are being most affected that they feel supported. We have a lot of veterans that will be part of this. We will have veterans with us in the Liberty vans, with the chaplain, with the lawyer, as we operate in these areas and document this. And so
Wow, that's fantastic.
the pushback, the politics, the idea that, hey, Donald Trump had a great 10 days here, like it was George Bush against John Kerry, and one of them had the ball and the other didn't, and one was landing punches against the other in a close race. That era is all over in America, right? We're fighting to maintain liberty in this country from ideas that are antithetical to the American idea and ideal, that have grown up out of the ground and swallowed us suddenly. Dorothy Thompson, great journalist, made the observation in the 1930s, people never see their dictator coming in advance. And so he's here.
This
And his hold on power is tenuous. But let's be real. The checks and balances have collapsed. The co-equality of the branches of government have fundamentally ceased. The military is in the hands of a dangerous, incompetent extremist. The federal police agencies have been deeply corrupted. The Department of Justice has been deeply corrupted. And one of the things I hope that we will stop doing on the opposition side is referring at all ever to the words red states and blue states. There are no red states and blue states. There's just the United States of America. And in the United States of America, at a political level, we have Democratic Party led states and we have Republican Party led states. And I think one of the most important things that can happen in the United States right now is that there would be legislation passed starting in California that makes it a felony in the state for any masked person to arrest an American citizen, any American, anyone on the soil of California, period. Now, the feds have primacy, but it will establish in the democratic states the high ground of the rule of law and to say what's happening here, what you are doing in this place, in this state where we value liberty, it is illegal. It is a felony. And each mass federal agent should enter those states knowing that under state law, they're committing felonies, whether they think they're immunized by their federal badge or not. And this is fundamental as we get the dregs of humanity handed federal badges in the next months under Trump's $125 billion ICE budget. As we get the three percenters, we get the oath keepers, we get every fired deputy sheriff and every fired cop from every city where they ever abused their power made into federal agents, every Proud Boy, every militia thug deputized and handed a badge. It is unacceptable. And so the challenges to this are going to be constant, that are going to be consistent. And we're going to be in the fight in this group. And there's a lot of groups out there that are going to be doing stuff, but it's just starting. And what I want to say lastly is this, is that history will record that through July 4th, literally to the edge of the 250th anniversary of the country, Donald Trump achieved his inaugural address. That inaugural address fundamentally repudiated the American Revolution, which was called the cause. It repudiated the cause, and it repudiated the Atlantic Charter, which was the blueprint, the architecture, the foundation of the world we live in, written by Churchill and FDR, agreed to in 1940, the vision for what the world would look like after fascism was defeated. What happened with the passage of the Big Beautiful Bill was its completion, its passage. He achieved what it is he set out to do. He did it by cutting through butter with a hot knife. And so now we live in a world where, because of the softness of the opposition, the lack of ability to communicate something better, the lack of steel, the lack of spine, we're in a much worse position than we otherwise would have been, which to some fundamental level is the American condition, right? Churchill said Americans always, in the end, tend to do the right thing after exhausting all the other possibilities. So we have, through our lassitude, through our lethargy, we have arrived at this place that need not have been arrived at, but here we are. And and from here, right? Donald Trump, who sits up on that hill now, we got to get him off the hill. And the American people get a big say in this in 2026. And there are two elections coming up, one in Virginia, one in New Jersey, where I suspect you will see a massive repudiation of the Trump stooges that harbinger the retribution of the American people that's going to be visited on all of Trump's MAGA cronies. And so I don't believe that the U.S. Senate is safely in the hands of the Republicans, right? I don't believe Colin Allred is going to be the Democratic nominee in Texas, right? I don't believe that everyone who is in Washington, D.C., who prognosticates on this stuff has a clue about what they're talking about. So what I think is going to happen is that people are going to rise up and repudiate this. But while this is all happening, while all of this chaos is unfolding, the temperatures will go up and up and up and up, and we will see the burst of flames. We will hear that sound of gunfire, right? We will see the violence that Trump has stoked and courted come to life because he planned for it to come to life, and he has the power to make his plans come to life. And so we're in a delicate, desperate moment in the history of the country. It's going to call on everybody to be good citizens and to be really engaged and involved and do their part and be involved in this next election, lest we lose this place. And there's no place else to go.
All right, well said, Steve. I want to make a final point here because we didn't talk about it, and that is when you were talking about how corporations respond when fascism comes. This is not a mystery. They always side with the regime over the people every time. And I've worked in corporate newsrooms for 30 years before I arrived on Substack in April. And we had an okay balance in this country between large corporations owning and media entities. It wasn't perfect, but for a long time it worked. And we built one of the great systems of the post-war era, which is a separation of church and state between the corporate side of things and the news side of things. And it was violated every once in a while, but for the most part, it worked surprisingly well. That system has broken down in America. We saw this last week in the most shocking example with Paramount forking over $16 million to the president. And then we found out they made an additional deal, which we don't even know the details of yet, for another $16 million. Absolutely crippling, embarrassing, humiliating the thousands of hardworking journalists at CBS and the other media entities under Paramount. I don't know about you, but I will do my damnedest never to spend another dollar on anything related to Paramount, which isn't fucking easy considering how much they own. But this, I know there's a lot going on and there's a lot of stuff to focus on. But in my business, as someone who's been inside big corporate newsrooms for 30 years, this is one of the scariest things I have seen because it shows that Trump's threat of holding the regulatory state over these corporations is working. He is threatening these corporations with regulation, with lawsuits, with not letting their mergers go through, by attacking their journalism, and he's getting the results he wanted. He filed an insane, frivolous, ridiculous, absurd lawsuit as a private citizen against CBS News over a freaking interview they did with Kamala Harris. It was a joke. This company handed over $16 million to settle that lawsuit because they want a merger to go through. And just think about the signal that sends to every journalist in that newsroom. It's not about, some corporate executives calling up and saying, kill a story. But now the next time you want a hard hitting story about Donald Trump, you think twice. And I say all of that both because this is what happens when fascist regimes who are willing to use the regulatory state to harass corporations when they come to power. This is what happens. And those corporations will trade will do business with a deal maker like Donald Trump for laissez-faire policies. They'll do that. They'd rather have that over the alternative. And it's why independent media at this moment in time is more important than ever. I know people on this on this live stream are already supporting independent media, but do it. Do it today. Go out and find 5 Substacks that you can support and send either subscribe or send money to, because corporate media in this country is under threat by Trump, and we need alternative outlets. And that's why what you're doing with what you explained with these vans and the video is a great idea, Steve. And I just needed to get that out because this Paramount deal is just devastating to people in my business.
Yeah, listen, I think the credibility of CBS News has been destroyed by this, right? No way back. And that's too bad.
Yeah. All right. Good talking to you, Steve. We'll do it again.
You got it. Good to see you, Ryan.
Noon on Monday.
Do it again.
I'll see you, man. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Bye-bye.